You mentioned that suffering is the raw material and that one needs to, I guess, experience that suffering. Does that mean that, in fact, you review experiences and feel the actual pain of those times? And
no, you don't invoke suffering. You just work with it when it arises. But you don't say, bring it on.
So you clean house as you,
right.
Dirty laundry is in front of you.
We usually have more than enough to deal with that we don't have to add more.
Okay. But at that given time, when you are confronted and you have these feelings, what do you actually do with them? Are you just doing a mental thing, or are you doing a whole physically involved thing where you're actually crying, screaming, whatever?
You would apply any of the different meditation methods you have learned that fall into one of the three categories that I was describing broadly yesterday, namely applying a remedy or antidote, which would be like practicing Tonglen, where instead of looking inward, oh, woe is me, my suffering is unbearable, you stop, project outward, look at the suffering of how many people in the world are on their deathbeds right now, alone, abandoned, go on and on and on and on. You know, animals eating one another, having one last moment of utter terror and panic, and look at the scale of that and your own little patch of suffering in this great world just is put back into perspective, and you start to let go. That's one method. That's applying an antidote. Then another method is the tantric method of transformation. You feel the energy of the weight of sadness or pain in your heart, and you visualize that in the form of the seed syllable and mantra of the deity Avalokiteshvara, and you imagine that as you recite Om Mani Padme Hum, the light rays radiate out from that mantra and seed syllable, touching the hearts and minds of all beings everywhere that are undergoing suffering, relieving them of their bad karma, their disturbed states of mind, their negative thought and emotional patterns, their ignorance, and so on, transforming them in turn into Avalokiteshvara, where they continually abide in a state of contentment and calm. That's the tantric method, transformation. As you go through that, there's no place left in your experience, in your perception, in your projections, for this concept of me and my suffering. The energy that gave rise to these negative patterns of thought and emotion has been transformed into something pure and positive. And as long as your mind stays there, that is true for you. That's what makes it tantric. It's a transformation of your whole perception of what is happening. And then the highest method is to look back at the essence of whatever it is that feels I am in pain right now. And then seeing that there is nothing there to be seen, you just drop it. And the thought, the feeling dissolves. And it comes back again out of habit, and you do it again and again and again. And this is kind of Dzogchen meditation instruction that you've been receiving from Lama Surya. So those are three examples of methods within those categories. There are other methods as well. But what you do is something positive and constructive rather than solidifying and extending, deepening the sense of pain and confusion or whatever you're going through. It's always our own minds that make it seem real. It's only as real as we make it. Emaho.
Hi.
Hi.
Two questions. When did you know that you were done being a lawyer? Was it one experience or a multitude of experiences? I'm just interested in that. And what about being a lawyer do you use now? What sort of, like, is there anything that carried over to help you in your day-to-day? Maybe not day-to-day, but...
One of the trainings I received in law school was mediation techniques. And I actually went through a formal course of training and got certified as a mediator in the New York court system, and went to a lot of sessions where people screamed at each other about, you're walking too loud in the apartment above me, and then, no, you're banging the broom against the floor too much, and people end up throwing chairs at each other. And I thought it would be much better if I could just teach people Buddhist meditation. It would get much closer to the heart of the problem, much faster than saying, I hear what you're saying. Now, can you hear what she's saying? Or does she need to repeat it? And another answer is that often what happens when you get caught up in a career is the goals that usually go along with that career take on a life of themselves, like I have to reach this position, or I have to earn this much money, or some other symbol that your mind can use to tell itself that you've done a good job. Fortunately, I got to a point where I looked at my bank account and said, oh, I do have enough money to build a Dharma Center now. Goodbye. And that was it. And I've never gone back.
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering if you could give me some advice. I'm doing Vajrasattva practice, and I have very strong guilt feelings, Jewish guilt, because of family relations that haven't gone well over many years. And I've tried to mediate so many times, and I've had friends tell me, we don't even understand why you're still doing that. I mean, you keep on forgiving and forgiving, and I don't know who said it, but somebody once said that there's like a stupid compassion too. You really have to, at a certain point, there's a certain cut I have to make sometimes, to get away and to really be compassionate to myself, for a while, so I can be sane again. And then all of a sudden I see that, there's no help. I can't help anymore. There's no help. I can't help. But now that I've stopped that and I feel much better, I have guilt.
Right. So often at the beginning, we feel that practicing kindness or compassion means doing our best to honor the wishes and requests of others, to do what they want and give them what they ask for. Even when it's obvious that what they want and ask for is coming from a very negative place inside of them. And what they're wanting and asking for is not, in any apparent way, actually going to be of benefit to them or anyone else in the short term or the long term, and maybe even would be more destructive, like the example in that chapter that I read. So compassion comes back to what we were discussing the other day, which is what is real happiness and what are the real causes of that happiness? What is suffering and what are the actual causes of suffering? And how is it that we all seem to get it upside down so much of the time? And when we pay attention to that and think of compassion as may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, then we can feel much more intelligent about deciding when to do what we're asked or to try to do something or not, because we can see whether we are implicitly helping other people perpetuate the causes of suffering or not. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say to someone is no, or I won't, or unless this, then I cannot help you anymore. Unless you stop drinking or cutting your wrists or whatever you're doing, there is nothing more I can do for you, and let the shock of that be your kindness. So there's always an element of skillfulness and intelligence that has to inform any act of compassion. But that means at the same time that you also have to be stable and clear in yourself to see your own motivation and see whether you're saying it's enough just because you're sick and tired and fed up, even though maybe you could do something more. So Look closely and honestly at your own mind. I always say, honesty is the greatest overlooked quality of Buddhist practice. We all need a lot more of it. Not blowing things out of proportion, making them too big, not making them seem too small, not trusting too much what we're told, not having too much doubt and skepticism about what we're told. Finding the middle way, finding the truth, the balance in whatever's coming at us. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Hi. You mentioned during this talk about having the practice be something that's constantly in your life, whether you're in retreat or whether you're in lay life, and using whatever comes up, whatever suffering may come up, as the fuel to get things going. And I've been wondering about, for quite some time now, in mostly lay life and pretty much anywhere that we do, there's a need for long stretches of real conceptual thought that happens one step after the other, where you really need to think through things. And as we know from meditation, those kind of chains of conceptual thought have a real strong way of generating emotions or just getting you caught up in different things. And it seems like it's not necessarily the right place to be doing practice, because that kind of cuts through that. And I'm trying to wonder, like, how do you merge the two things?
Okay, let me test that a little bit. What is it about having to engage in long strings of conceptual thought that necessarily gives rise to or generates negative emotion? For example, we've published the Book of Common Tibetan Buddhist Prayers as a sample in the library. It takes about 12 hours to read through the whole thing. There's a lot of concepts, meaning to analyze, visualizations. Mind is working really hard the whole time. Hopefully positive qualities, including emotions, are the result of that investment of effort and mental energy. So why does it have to be negative?
I don't think that it has to be negative.
Okay.
I think that it has a way of distracting awareness, increasing discursive thought, and keeping you in that cycle where it's really hard to not identify with the thoughts, etc.
Okay. So you stop. And then you go back to what you were doing. And you do that over and over again. You won't lose that much time. You'll still be very efficient in your work. But just keep cutting. As soon as you notice my mind is just going too far astray, that energy is just burning this gear out, stop. And stop, like drop it 100% in that moment. I used to do that all the time sitting at my desk in the law office, where I had to work often 18 hours straight, finishing a brief, analyzing something, preparing a report. It's the only way. And that in itself is a very, very good training.
Did you find that to be a very different experience than the retreat?
Not in that moment. Is that enough?
Thank you.
Just remember that it's your own mind bringing back those patterns, and that you're not observing them so clearly because you're focused on something else. But it's not the work making you have negative thoughts. It's not whatever you're reading or writing that is making that happen to you. It's just awareness, lack of awareness, that's it. Right? Yes?
Atisha teaches Lojong. Maybe I'm confused about this, but more as a meditative practice while we're quiet. But is it separate, the practice of exchanging self and other, like more on the spot? If someone, for instance, thinks that they've been cut off in traffic by you and jumps out of their car and starts screaming at you, and you try to put yourself in their position before you react, and maybe they had a bad day, maybe if I react to this person, I'll go home and beat his wife or kids or something. And exchanging self and other, is that different, or is that a fruition of Lojong, or?
I guess it depends on whether they're carrying a weapon.
I was referring to the practice itself. That was just an example.
I'm kidding. the practice you do at home, exchanging self and others, or the 7 steps in the Lojong, equalizing, all these different steps in this training. The more sincerely and genuinely you train in them on your own time when no one is going to come pounding on your windshield, the more prepared you will be to know exactly how to be and how to maintain your composure and clarity and responsiveness in that moment without having to go through a whole process in your mind. You're already trained. It's like piano impresario. Sit them down in front of a piano and say, can you play something? They don't go through this long process. Well, first I put this finger here. I know how to do that. You're just like, oh, okay. No. Mental impresarios. Tulku Urgyen used to say, even practicing Dzogchen was the same thing. In that it's like when we are small children, he said, and we go to school for the first time and we have to learn how to write the letters of the alphabet in Tibetan, ka, ka, ga, and so on. He said, you put the pencil in your hand and you hardly even know how to hold it, and you look at the example on the chalkboard and you try your hard and your hand is like so tense, and you try to make that same mark and it doesn't even look remotely the same, and you try again and again and again and again and again. And then as an adult, someone says, oh, can you write a note about this? And you're like, oh, okay, and it's done. And you didn't think about how to do it or what the letters look like. It's all training. Okay?
I don't have, I've just been thinking about this, so see what you had to say, which is, here's suffering, and then I'm not sure that it's always being separated from pain, right? Because pain's not necessarily suffering. That what they say, like in some of the mindfulness areas, is that pain plus resistance equals suffering. And I'm wondering if that might be helpful in
Yeah, I think
our
that's
discussion.
just a terminology issue, because we could say sensation that seems strong, stronger than we care to be present for in a moment, creates the resistance, which then makes it pain. So the fact that we call it pain means the resistance is already there. But sensation is just sensation. If we decide that it's a good thing, we can put up with a lot. Right? We decide it's a bad thing, then as soon as it starts to happen, we freak out.
So it's that labeling that makes the difference.
Well, the resistance has already happened. When you talk about the 5 skandhas, there's already some attraction or repulsion that has happened, which then creates the state of mind, which then forms the concept. But the mindfulness has to be present at the level of sensation in this example to see whether or not grasping is occurring, and therefore the rest of this chain that results in the experience we call suffering.
Is there a list somewhere of the antidotes and remedies that you can look up? Like for different emotions, different whatever?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of teachings about that.
Is there a particular name or a place that we could look it up?
I'm very bad at those kinds of questions. I'm not a walking encyclopedia of Dharma resources.
Okay, so then just
I recommend Mr. Google.
Fair enough. In terms of the transmutations, then, is there only one, or are there many?
There are many, and different approaches, different deities even you might use depending upon the negative emotion or state of mind. That's something you should have more personal teaching and instruction on if it seems appropriate. But again, there are resources out there that talk about different negative emotions and which wisdom they can correspond to if they are experienced free of grasping and fixation and regenerated in the form of pure experience and so forth. So the whole mandala principle of 5 Buddha families, all of this belongs to this topic.
Thank you for teaching. I'm curious about if there's anything from your own practice as a lawyer you can share about my experience as a therapist is about getting sometimes lost in and carried away by other people's stories. And the compassion can be overwhelming. That space of seeing a form as emptiness and emptiness as form, the space of a spacious mind goes away, pulled in by the energy and the belief of the other person in their story, in the power of their story.
Right.
So I loved what you said about the 3 practices, and I'm going to write and meditate about that, but I'm just curious, in your experience practicing, if you have something to share about that.
I think when you are with someone and you yourself are just present and not holding on to any image of yourself or them, then you can hear all the ins and outs of their story and just hear it as an expression of their sense of being disturbed or, lost in something, without at all having your conceptual mind engaged in the content of the story such that it starts to go somewhere. And the more you can just be sane and be present as someone else is feeling not composed, the more opportunity you actually provide for them. You give them a reference point, a guidepost, a lamp back to a place where they feel calm, where they in turn can generate some genuine insight about their own experience. People come to you looking for you to tell them what's really going on. Your job, probably, in your own mind, is to help them see within themselves what's really going on, because you can't do that for them, am I right? So the more stable your own practice is, the better you can do that job, I believe, whether it's a therapist or a lawyer listening to some complete lunatic raving on the other end of the telephone about how the courts are screwing him and this, that, and the other thing, which happens all the time.
Very similar practice.
Can I share with people what you told me yesterday about the human body?
Sure.
We were talking about repulsiveness, right? The repulsiveness of the human body. So this kind person says, I am a bag of water filled with toothpicks and marshmallows. I really appreciate that. Go ahead.
I have experience of what you're speaking of, and that's delicious. The place where the rubber meets the road is where I'm lost, and how to get back from, okay, I ring the bell in session.
The place where the rubber meets the road is where you are found, not where you are lost.
Okay, that's what I needed. Same teaching as yesterday. Thank you.
I was just curious about what happened. So you got the Dharma Center, and now how do you divide your time amongst practice and students and traveling and teaching and just running a Dharma Center. I was just curious about that.
I try not to think about it. I always say, just do whatever needs to be done. Whether that's someone calling up and saying, my aunt just died, can you do prayers? Or whether it means going to check on my dog as she was, spending her last hours on this earth recently. Or cleaning up the poop from the driveway, or whatever. It's all the same work. It's always done now, and it's always done with the most presence and compassion I can bring to bear. And as long as my energy continues, I'll just continue in the same way. And however it works out, however I end up spending more of my time or less of my time, doesn't matter. I like coming here and hanging out with you guys, though. It's fun.
You must have made a lot of money.
Well, the good news or the bad news is that most of it was lost in the market scandals that occurred in 2008. So. But the Dharma Center is there. Who has the microphone? Mr. Drew.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
So, the practice is, I guess, it's been working through me with more frequency, let's say, and I want to just check in with you, get your thoughts. I think particularly since the fall retreat and Kusum Lingpa, I mean, I've done a lot of deity work, obviously, and other practices of that, but somehow the practice is evolving where on its own and I want to check if it's like an ego thing or is it, you know what I mean, or you're smiling already.
Who wants to know if it's an ego thing, your ego or somebody else?
Yeah, well, see this, because the statement you just said was just, very Sochan pithy, someone asked me about non-dual awareness, is there any other? So this I guess let me just say, like, on a day, just a moment by moment, this is not mine. It is, okay, if you want to call it Kuntuzangpo, but it's not mine. It's something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Even the duality aspects of it, even just the momentary, whatever it is, this moment here, is it really mine? And then it kind of brings into that.
Oh, who's asking? Seriously. What are you trying to figure out?
I guess it's a greater, I find there's moments when it's trusted in it and rested in it,
right.
Resting in that, and it's not even a question.
Right, you told me that in Rochester.
Yeah, and it's trusting and it's in the grandeur, then the grand display of everything arising. And say, hey, this is really great. This is good.
So is that good enough or not?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just sometimes I find that I guess the confidence or the conceptuality about it, or just thinking, the confidence, let's say, or the trusting just kind of wanes back into, well, now I'm kind of judging this is, or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times, if I do more practices, then it just, that issue kind of drops more so, and then there's a greater,
Okay, so what I'm asking you in different ways is, what are you hoping will happen? You're saying it's like this, but sometimes it's like that. What I'm hearing is it's not exactly okay somehow, that sometimes it's like this and sometimes it's like that. Maybe there's some other way it should be, more like this most of the time and not so much like that some of the time, which to me just sounds like hope and fear, hope and fear. Am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? When I'm doing it right, what is it I'm doing right that the rest of the time I'm not remembering to do right? And all this kind of thinking. Is it? Or am I just projecting?
No, it's absolutely, there's definitely, there's less when there isn't a sense of hope, then I'm not worried, you know, it's not a question of.
Should I just say to you, just keep going?
Oh boy. Yeah, you got a point.
I would just like to share with Drew my personal mantra, keep continue, given to me by Bardu Tulku Rinpoche at the monastery in Woodstock. I was like 19 or 20 and freaking out about, you know, Buddhism and getting hit over the head by Lama Surya Das with a Vajra bolt when I was 19. And, you know, I'm a musician and what should I do? And I think I went on for about 20 minutes and you know, an amazing opportunity to have a personal interview with him. And at the end, you know, I'm going, I don't know what and he just goes, keep continue. And I was like, holy, you know, keep continue. And it's something that has stuck with me, and all my friends know it as well. And we, every 6 months or a year or so, we kind of say, hey, keep continue.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to say that it's very refreshing, having been raised by a lawyer, to experience the intellect turned toward the Dharma and the expression of the Dharma, and I think you know what I'm talking about, even though I don't feel like I'm articulating what I want to say.
Okay.
There's all that energy that I've seen used in such a negative way for all those fights and all those I'm rights, and being raised in it and even being told by that fighter, you'd make a good lawyer because I fought so well against him and I argued so well against his argument.
Yeah.
And then to hear and experience that kind of mind used in such a positive way is very, very refreshing.
It's so amazing, isn't it? How people can be so smart and yet so stupid. All the most important questions not only aren't asked, they can't be understood. So the mind can be so powerful in one direction and so blind to itself in another. Nyingje, how deserving of compassion. Really. Of course, the good lawyers don't have that problem. Okay. There's somebody there who's pointing.
I'm interested in Tongnen, you
Tongnen.
mentioned, but it seems like except me, everybody knows here. So I'm not going to ask you to do it here, but is there any place that I can find this?
I'm sure there are resources within this Sangha for getting started with that, am I right? Or no?
We don't generally practice it much here.
Mm.
There are resources in other, Pema Chodron.
Lama Surya certainly does talk about it from time to time, and we have practiced in the past, but it's not a current practice we're doing.
Well, have the good...
It's in Awakening the Buddhist Heart, if you're interested. You can look in his book, Awakening the Buddhist Heart, Lama Surya's book.
It's very, very popular, common practice, so if you're interested, you will easily find a lot about it. And if you have the intention, then a course like this next time or a similar one, you'll have opportunity to learn. It's very, very good practice. Tonglen. Sending and taking. Exchanging self and other, huh? Not so much, no.
I believe Pema Chodron she discusses that in her books, following the places that scare you, the places that scare you. And she has a whole section on Tonglen, and she breaks it down step by step. That's one resource.
It's good to read these things. I do find, though, that it's very helpful to learn Tonglen if you're walked through it by someone live on the spot. So you get the real feeling and flavor for how it works and what happens. And there can be some responsiveness, someone sees where you're sticking or not. Maybe not. No, I don't want to rush.
I don't know Tonglen either, but I'm working with dying people. Would that practice be useful?
100%.
Okay, I call it bubble meditation.
Bubble?
Because I usually do it when they're in the bubble bath. So they say, I feel good. I say it's the bubble effect.
Hi, thank you for your teaching.
You're welcome.
Something came up for me hearing Drew's comments. I recently read that Tulku Rinpoche defines the Sochan view as when we're in meditation, we're remaining in Rigpa, and post-meditation is straying into the expression of Rigpa.
You're doing what?
Straying into the expression of Rigpa.
Straying.
Into the expression of Rigpa. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Straying doesn't sound like a very positive word, so I'm a little hesitant without knowing the context in which he said it or what he was trying to say. Being one of my root gurus, I'm very hesitant to comment on his teaching without knowing exactly. I don't want to speculate.
Straying off the cushion, once we leave the cushion, into daily life.
To me, when you say straying, it sounds like the continuity of recognition is broken. That the display of Rigpa, meaning all the phenomena that appear, which are the projections of our own mind and our own mind nature, once again deceive us so that we forget that it is energetic expression. And in that sense, we stray from Rigpa into its expression. But that's just my best guess of what he meant, not knowing specifically what you're referring to. That's what it sounds like to me. So it's post-meditation, that's not really post-meditation.
For me, it was helpful because I felt like I'm straying, but I'm not going anywhere. Still in the expression of Rigpa. And it's been sort of a positive experience, realizing that I'm not really going anywhere, even though I may think I'm going.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more? Two more?
I was just wondering, I understand your background with the 3-year retreat, but I don't know what your background, like I don't know who Kusum Lingpa is. And, you know, I already read that book. I want a story from you, like about, you know, I want a story. But I guess, I mean, you gave stories in the book, but I read it a while ago, like I read it the last time you were here. So, but what did you do? So you became a lawyer for 10 years. You built, you came out of retreat. I'm just a little discontinuous. You came out of retreat, and then you became a lawyer, or?
I came out of retreat. I went to Nepal. I went back into retreat. I went back to Nepal.
Who did you go into retreat with?
The subsequent time I went into retreat practicing something from Tulku Urgyen's lineage for 1 year in solitary retreat. And then I went back to Nepal to kind of close out that cycle to receive the final instructions, and came back and did 8 days of fire puja by myself on top of the mountain to complete that practice. And then I went to law school. So I was 32 when I went back to school. I hadn't been in school since I was 20.
I'm doing the same thing.
About Kusum Lingpa?
No, I said I'm going back to school I'm 36, so. Kind of, I'm a teacher, so I'm like in school all day, but. And then you.
Bottom line, I was telling someone yesterday that the more practice you do, the better off you will be no matter what you do in your life, whether it's go back to school or job or family or whatever. So I'm very happy that I did all those years of practice and study of Dharma before I went back to law school, rather than try to do it the other way.
So, I guess Lama Surya told me to ask you what you think of, 3-year retreat. So, because, you mentioned earlier that the hardest part, it's a controlled environment, and then, the coming out is pretty, so I guess what I'm wondering is, what do you see as kind of the alternative?
One way or another, you have to develop real stability and continuity in practice. This is what I've been talking about in one way or another for the past 3 days here. There isn't just one way to do that. There isn't one way to do it that's always going to be right for one person. It will change over time, age, life situations, opportunities. But as long as your goal remains to have your Dharma follow the path so that there is that sense of continuity and growing integration of your practice experience with all of what happens to you in life, then at different times you will be presented with different choices and different opportunities about what the next steps should be, and then you just have to keep going, continue. It might mean you go into a 3-year retreat. It might mean you go on this kind of retreat 2 or 3 times a year and then take a day off every week if you can and do practice at home. It could mean almost anything. But as long as you remember what your purpose is, then you find your way. I don't want to say that there's one way because I know there isn't.
Yeah, I just was wondering what some of your other ideas were, like
A
practicing
bunch of people in my generation look around now and we say to one another, we must have been crazy when we were young to just go off and do all these 3-year retreats because, who does that now? It's a different world. Maybe today it's not the same decision as it was 20 or 30 years ago. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have regret. When we talk about the Dharma becoming a path, because one has stabilized these different reflections about what's really going on in life and what happiness really is, and so on, as we've been talking about. I just wanted to mention that there's a word or a term that captures the sense of this, of what enables us to keep going and to always remember when we're confronted by difficult situations, remember to keep going. That term is called ngejong in Tibetan, which is very poorly translated as renunciation. Because it's not really renunciation in the sense of trying to get away from things or reject them and push them away. It's renunciation in the sense of intelligently renouncing the causes of suffering for ourselves and others. So it's better translated as the arising of certainty or the gaining of a conviction. The conviction that continuing along in the same patterns of thought and emotion and behavior that have led us to trouble so many times is no longer an option. And when we do find ourselves straying off in the destructive direction, that in itself starts more and more powerfully to become a reminder that we again have to reorient ourselves in the right direction. So that truing mechanism that keeps turning us back, whether we're happy or sad, alone or with others, that keeps sending us back in the direction that we need to go, is ngejong, the arising of certainty or conviction that Dharma is the option. Okay? And if we have that, then the specific decisions of should I go to school or should I go in retreat are much easier to figure out. Because there are no longer choices between Dharma or not Dharma. There are choices between what form should this take next in my life that's going to continue my development. Right? Sonam de tamche zikpa nye tobne nye pe dranam pamje shing je gana chi balong trukpa sipe tsole drowa drowa. Tusum shepe jarwa tamje ji ngoa kangla chokto ngakpa de dakshins. Kiwe tsawa di konchang zampo chuchi raptu ngowarji. Mulon jarbo dida choki so tae drowa kanda penje jin. Kuntu zampo jenbe shundru te ngensone no malu tombar. Kunzang droje chanchen minchene drinchin sawe lama yan cheche. Drowe dundu mulang kanda ba dida tamche dakshin druparsho. Changdrup semchok rinpoche mache panam che jorje. Chepa nyamba mepa yang kongne kongtu pelwarsho. I so much enjoyed having this time to spend with you, and I hope we get another chance to do it again soon. Thank you so much. And just keep going.